How did Elisha's prophecy to Jehoram come to pass? This is the question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 2 Kings on walking through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing 2 Kings chapter 7, verses 9 to 20. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to 2 Kings chapter 7, verse 9. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 2 Kings chapter 7, beginning at verse 9. Then they said to one another, "We are not doing right. This day is a day of good news, and we remain silent. If we wait until morning light, some punishment will come upon us. Now therefore, come, let us go and tell the king's household." So they went and called the gatekeepers of the city and told them, saying, "We went to the Syrian camp, and surprisingly no one was there, not a human sound, only horses and donkeys tied, and the tents intact." And the gatekeepers called out, and they told it to the king's household inside. So the king arose in the night and said to his servants, "Let me now tell you what the Syrians have done to us. They know that we are hungry. Therefore they have gone out of the camp to hide themselves in the fields, saying, 'When they come out of the city, we shall catch them alive and get into the city.' And one of his servants answered and said, 'Please let several men take 5 of the remaining horses which are left in the city. Look, they may either become like all the multitude of Israel that are left in it, or indeed, I say, they may become like all the multitude of Israel left from those who are consumed. So let us send them and see.' Therefore they took 2 chariots with horses, and the king sent them in the direction of the Syrian army, saying, 'Go and see.' And they went after them to the Jordan, and indeed all the road was full of garments and weapons which the Syrians had thrown away in their haste. So the messengers returned and told the king. Then the people went out and plundered the tents of the Syrians. So a seah of fine flour was sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel, according to the word of the Lord. Now therefore the king had appointed the officer on whose hand he leaned to have charge of the gate. But the people trampled him in the gate, and he died, just as the man of God had said, who spoke when the king came down to him. So it happened, just as the man of God had spoken to the king, saying, 2 seahs of barley for a shekel, and a seah of fine flour for a shekel shall be sold tomorrow about this time in the gate of Samaria. Then the officer had answered the man of God and said, 'Now look, if the Lord would make windows in heaven, could such a thing be?' And he said, 'In fact, you shall see it with your own eyes, but you shall not eat of it.' And so it happened to him, for the people trampled him in the gate, and he died." In our last lesson, we got Elisha's prophecy to Jehoram concerning the siege of Samaria. Elisha didn't come right out and say the siege would end, but he did mean that by what he did say. There was a shortage of food in Samaria due to a famine caused by the siege. This led to rampant inflation and the selling of things that Israel would not normally eat, unclean animals. Elisha said that the next day barley and flour would be sold in the markets for much less. Now Elisha didn't say where this barley and flour would come from, whether by natural or miraculous means, but he did say it would happen the next day. An officer of Jehoram didn't believe this, and so Elisha prophesied that the man would live to see the event happen, but would not taste of it because he would die. Again, Elisha didn't say how the man would die, but he did say that he would die. How God brought about this was by striking fear into the hearts of the Syrians so that they fled, leaving behind everything: food, money, horses, clothing, you name it. If it impeded the Syrians' flight out of Samaria, it was left behind. This was discovered by 4 lepers who had gone out to surrender the Syrians in hopes that they might live. In the beginning, these lepers began to take the plunder for themselves, but then their conscience wounded them. They knew that they were doing something wrong by not immediately telling the king what had happened, for the people of the city were suffering under this famine too, and this type of news could really help them. They said to themselves that had they waited until morning to tell the king, thereby continuing to take more bounty for themselves, certainly they would be punished. So they decided to go and tell the king what had happened. Now one doesn't just walk up to the king and talk with him, especially in the middle of the night. Instead, they talked to the gatekeepers, who then went and told the king. At first, Jehoram didn't believe what was being told to him, thinking that the Syrians must be tricking them. Certainly, they had gone out into the fields to hide, and when the people came out to raid the camp, the Syrians would attack and take the city. As someone who didn't trust God, it is easy to understand Jehoram's thoughts here, but Elisha had just told him that day that the siege would end, and now it appears that has come to pass. Yet Jehoram remained faithless. One of his servants, though, suggested that some scouts be sent out with the remaining horses to see if the siege indeed was over, or whether it was a ruse. The servant said that these men who were sent really would have nothing to lose, for if they died at the hands of the Syrians, it would be no worse for them, for they would have died had they remained in the city. Jehoram agreed and sent the scouts, who reported back that indeed the Syrians had fled past the Jordan, leaving behind all that they had with them, including food. Knowing this, the people went out and plundered the tents, allowing them to sell fine flour and barley in the markets cheaper than what they could have even a day earlier, just as Elisha said. In doing this, the Lord didn't make crops appear from nowhere. He didn't send rain and supercharge their growth. He simply struck fear into the hearts of the Syrians that they abandoned their food, among other things, allowing Samaria to once again be able to eat. And with the siege over, they could once again grow their food and survive that way. As for the officer that had disbelieved Elisha the day before, Jehoram had set him up as gatekeeper in Samaria. When the people heard that the siege was over, again they rushed to the Syrian camp to plunder it, but in doing so, they trampled this man that he died. This doesn't appear to have been done intentionally, but rather in their haste to get out of the gate, they killed this man. In this, the word of the Lord was fulfilled, just as Elisha had said. For us today, we can have confidence that the will of the Lord, whatever it is, will come to pass because of events like these. Some people comment on our channel, why study the Old Testament? Why not just study the New Testament, which contains the message about Jesus? Well, one of the reasons is to gain confidence that the Lord says what he means and means what he says, that his promises come true. And if they came true then, they will come true today and into the future. Sure, there isn't some deep theological teaching to come out of 2 Kings 7. But we do learn a lot about the power of God here, something that we can certainly use to help grow our faith. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 2 Kings chapter 8, verses 1 to 6, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.